Welcome to the show. We're doing a video cast, and my name is Matt Wolach. I am really excited to be joined by Joe Escobedo. He is the brand builder. Joe, say hi.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with Joe last week, and I've known this guy for a while through LinkedIn, and he is so much fun. I just had such a good time. I'm like, hey, let's just record this. We're talking some great stuff. We're talking about sales. We're talking about some really interesting, thoughtful, cool things. We better get this on recording so we can share this with the world. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
So here we are. So we decided, and I thought it was pretty funny because, Joe, your experience, tell me a little bit about, what you've done and what you're doing now, because I think that'll give a good lead into what we want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very good question. So I started my business a couple years ago, and when I started it out, I come from a marketing background, and I was like, okay, we're going to do content marketing. That's going to be the core focus. But what I realized, particularly in Asia, there's massive opportunity. There's a huge sales force. So taking a lot of the principles that we applied from my background in journalism, marketing, and comms, and applying that into a sales, to a sales force has been one of the key things that we've done over the past couple of years. Now, obviously, we still do a lot in terms of content creation, but for the sake of this call, we'll focus completely on the social selling aspect, which is very much of a hot topic here in Asia.
I bet it is. And by the way, when he says Asia, he means it. He's in Singapore. And
Yeah.
I hear it's beautiful in Singapore. I got to get out there, Joe.
Absolutely. Come on down. I'm happy to give you a tour.
We got to get past all this lockdown business, and I'll be happy to fly over there real quick for lunch.
Yeah, sounds good, my friend.
Awesome. So that's interesting because a lot of my career has been selling to smaller, medium-sized stuff. And really, I've really appreciated kind of the burn and turn transactional sale. I do have experience with enterprise sales. I do have experience coaching and guiding teams that are enterprise sales, but I really cut my teeth on the small and medium. And I think as you get started, as you launch your business, usually it's a lot easier to sell to the small and medium operations. What's your take initially about the difference between selling to small and medium versus selling to enterprise? How do you feel about those?
So that's a good question. Honestly, I feel far more comfortable selling to enterprise now. I think when I started my business, I tried to sell towards startups and SMEs, and I think I found it really challenging. Even though I started my career selling and working with startups at Oklahoma Small Business Development Center, but what I realized, at least for my company, is that there wasn't a market fit in terms of the products we were developing. So we developed these kind of customized, high-end kind of coaching, training, and consultations, which a lot of entrepreneurs are not really ready for. So we had to pivot and mostly work with now Fortune 500 companies. And so once again, it's just funny how that worked out. I think we started with one, and then it's kind of cascaded. So I think all of our clients now are Fortune 500. So yes, I'm on the flip side of your experience. Like I said, I find it more difficult to sell to startups now than I do to enterprise organizations.
That's fascinating. So one of the things for me about selling to the smaller medium is I love that you can get to a decision maker right away. And you usually don't have a problem finding that person who is ready to pull the trigger and who is going to be the one making the call. I've found difficulty in when you go to an enterprise, it frustrates me that you convince this person and they're so excited and they're so gung-ho. And then they say, oh, but I got to go talk to this group. I got to go talk to this board or this person. And I'm like, oh, I had you. What happened there? So you realize, oh, my deal I thought I was just going to close is now going to be another 6 months, another 9 months. So what types of advantages have you taken, or what types of tactics have you taken to apply when you do have an opportunity to get to a decision maker? How do you get to those decision makers in your experience?
So that's a very good question. I think for me, I've always taken a long-term approach to either building businesses or building brands. I think that has helped me in terms of selling to enterprises because, like you said, the sales cycle is significantly longer than selling to SMEs. So you have to have a bit more patience. You have to have a bit more longer-term perspective in terms of once you close that deal, what do the next 2 or 3 deals look like? So I try to plan that out ahead, so kind of, maybe spending 3 to 6 months, but then the the outcome is significantly higher than selling to an SMEs. So I think one of which is taking that long-term effect, that long-term perspective. The other thing that I realized, and once again, this happened organically, I didn't plan for it, but everyone wants to sell to the CEO, they want to sell to the CMO, and it's honestly really, really hard to get to those people. I mean, the higher you go, the more people want a piece of you, either your time or they want you to buy something. And so even though I have the gray hair, I am not that old.
We both do, my man. We both do.
So I think that was kind of an Achilles heel, when I started. Now I have conversations with CEOs all the time, but when I just started, I found it far easier to talk to someone maybe at a managerial level. So either sales manager or marketing manager, simply because we were roughly about the same age. I was probably a little bit older than them. So it was kind of like a mentor role in which they saw me. And that has in turn led to a lot of internal introductions. So for example, instead of me going directly to the CEO or the CMO and saying, hi, here's what I do, et cetera, he or she's not going to be too receptive to that. So what I've done is I've, been fortunate to make very good relationships with a lot of the executional managerial levels teams who have said, you got to meet my boss. And then that boss says, you got to meet my boss. And so that's how we worked with one of our clients is in the financial services space. We got introduced to the manager who introduced to the director, to the VP, and then to the CEO and CMO.
That's awesome.
So it was it was kind of a very, very different approach than I think a lot of people do. Now, granted, it takes a little bit longer, but the advantages of that is at that point, you're not really selling in yourself. You're having your internal champion who can do that for you. So it helps accelerate the process. Instead of me going to each department and saying, hi, blah, 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 that's what I do, et cetera, et cetera. I simply talk to who I'm connected with and I'm say, hey, we've obviously had a good working relationship. We've had a good outcome. Would it be okay if you'd introduce me to so-and-so? And 90% of the time, 100% of the time, no one's rejected me yet, but they're like, yeah, sure, no worries. And so you think about it from a relationship point of view, if someone we had never met before and Matt introduced them to me, I'm going to be far more, inclined to say, okay, I got to talk to them because Matt introduced me versus them reaching out to me indirectly on LinkedIn or somewhere else. So I think that whole approach has really helped me develop some of my enterprise relationships.
That's great. And I love how you mentioned the champion, because it's so important to have a champion within an organization. If you're going to be selling to a larger organization, to have that person who believes in you, believes in your service, your product, and is the champion, is the salesperson within the organization. What do you do about equipping that person with the knowledge so that they can sell for you effectively, so they can go up the ladder and make sure that they're relaying all the information that you'd like that C-level or that decision maker to understand? How do you equip your champions?
So it's a very good question. The first thing I try to do is better understand their specific role. So what are they responsible for? What is their business unit doing? What are some of the key priorities? And then I try to align that, because I do a lot of different things, but I don't want to just flood them with all the different options we have. Instead, I would be very laser focused and say, okay, let's say that you are responsible for upskilling a sales force of 3,000 people in Singapore, for example. What are some of the key priorities? What are some of the gaps that you see? And then from there, I do a lot of discovery once again to find out, does my product or what does my offering even fit? I'm happy to say, if it's not a fit, then it's not. I can't help you directly, but there's definitely someone in my network who can help you. So I think having that very candid conversation early on helps filter out, can I add value to this conversation, or is it best for me to introduce someone else in my network? And then from there, it's just constant education. I think the advantages of, what we do on LinkedIn and other platforms, something like this, is it's educational. So for example, when I meet someone, 9 times out of 10, they already know me. And by know me, I mean like they've seen a video, they read a blog, or they saw me speak. So that conversation becomes far more natural. It's like I'm speaking to a friend like this. So I think that building that rapport early on helps them open up, because I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm trying to find out more about their challenges, where the opportunities are for them. And also, once again, because they've already heard about me, then we can cut straight to the chase. I don't have to go, here's my creds deck and blah, 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 which I have had to done, I think, most of my career. And I think I failed so many times because I took that same, here's my deck. Now I don't have any deck. I don't go in with any materials.
Wow.
I say, you know what? It's a conversation. And I think that has definitely taken a lot of time. It's definitely not something, not my career that I started out with I could do very well. But the more I understand my capabilities, some of the work we've done, some of my expertise, I become more confident in that approach and not have to use kind of demos or creds as a crutch nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. It can be tough to get there, but I like the idea of building up your image or your expertise and making sure that people understand that, so that before they ever get to you, they already have a good understanding of your capabilities and what you've done. I think that's wonderful. And I've seen that too. Well, I mean, you and me were a perfect example. We communicated a long time together before we ever had a conversation. We had messages back and forth. I'm like, this guy's great. I like this guy. And finally we had a conversation. It was like BFFs forever. So it totally is true. It can happen, whether it's in a partner relationship or just a contact, or, if you are working with a target and somebody you can actually work with and sell to. I think that's understandable and wonderful.
Absolutely. I forget the statistic, but, it looks like, I think it's like 6 or 7 out of 10 people, particularly in the B2B enterprise space, have already made a decision in terms of who they're going to work with by the time they even reach out to you.
Wow.
So it's incredible. So a lot of the legwork is already done through the brand you've built, either your personal brand or your corporate brand. At that point, the conversation is, the how. The how is, what are the next steps versus the why. Why should we go with you? Why should we go with you versus our competitors? Et cetera, et cetera. And
Sure.
I think it's where a lot of people face what I call and you've probably been this as well, the dreaded third quote. I don't know if they have that rule out there. But
I haven't heard it. This is interesting though. We're learning something. What is this?
Well, so this is something that happens a lot in Asia, that for legal purposes in a lot of organizations, you have to get 3 quotes. So
three bids. Got it.
3 bids, yeah,
Okay.
3 bids.
Yes.
3 bids or 3 quotes. So anything over a certain amount, you have to get a bid or a quote. And so a lot of people are in that unfortunate position where they are the third quote, meaning that they'll never get the opportunity. They've already picked who they want to work with, and you just have to go through all the sweat and tears of putting together a beautiful proposal and try to get it through. But in reality, you don't have any chance of winning it. I know how that feels like because I've been there before. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't do any pitches really. I always tell myself, and looking back in hindsight, if I have to do a pitch, I've already lost. Because I'm already in that third quote perspective, where nowadays I don't put together anything more than 1 page. If I can't sell it in 1 page, then I have failed somewhere in the process.
Wow, you must have a really good 1-pager.
It's I think it's taken me a little bit of time. I think I try to just get straight to the point, because at that point, like I said, they've already bought in. I don't need to say, okay, here's the kind of companies I've worked with, here's my expertise, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas a lot of people will focus on that in the creds. They say, I spent 10 slides on, here's what we work with, here's what we do, here's our specialties, et cetera, et cetera. Where I have, here's the objectives, here's my approach or strategy, here's a timeline, and then here's an investment. If you're okay with that, let's proceed. If not, then that's okay as well.
Good luck.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I can tell you it's a lot different in the small and medium space. So that's an interesting dichotomy there, because I have seen that when you're at an enterprise level, they've pretty much figured out, okay, this is who we want to work with. Now it's a matter of not so much convincing that person, but convincing the rest of the organization that this is something they should do. They don't really think of, there should be other companies or we should, but they do think, okay, do we do it or do we not do it at all? is really what it comes down to. In the small medium space, a lot of times they realize we need to do this thing. It's just a matter of who we do it with. And so you see, we've looked at this company, we looked at this company. In my world of software, we did a demo with them, we did the demo with them, we did the demo with them. So for me, at that level, when you're talking small medium, it's much more of how do you differentiate between the others? They've most of the time figured out this is something we want to do. Now it's, okay, of these 3, 5, 7 companies, which one rises above the rest? Which one stands out? Which one delivers and can solve our problems? And so that's really what we work on, and what I coach and teach is differentiation through process. And you must have a tremendous process, a process that really is buyer-centric, really focused on the consumer and their needs, of course, their problems and solving those problems. But when you're able to do everything just right, and for me, I have a bunch of different factors. In fact, just the sales call or the demo itself is 40 different factors that you have to do correctly, that I rate people on, and most people score about a 40% out of 100. So there's a lot of problems with it, with people selling out there. But if you can do those things, since most people are scoring at about a 40% out of 100, if you can be a 75, 80%, guess what? You're going to look so much different to all of those other companies out there. And one thing I love about the small medium is the quick sales cycles. So once you do rise above, and because they've already realized this is a thing we need to do, bingo, you can close the deal. You're already talking to the decision maker. You've already convinced them that you are different, that you are the solution. Let's roll. So like you said, enterprise, you get a much bigger lift. You get a much bigger hit, obviously, with the larger deal sizes, but it can sometimes take some time to get there. With smaller medium, you get a smaller hit, but you can get it more often. And I think for me, it's about those little wins. A lot of the reason that I do what I do is for competition and I love winning. I've always loved sports. You know, I even my post today, this will replay later, but my post today was about football. So, and I don't know if you saw that, but it was a good one.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, you got to check it out. So anyway, I love the wins. And for me, I would rather have 10 smaller wins a month than one really big win a month. It just feels better getting those little hits to me. Of course, when you get a big win, it feels great. So I totally understand that. But I think that's kind of where I started to realize in my career where I wanted to kind of aim was, you know, hey, I love having these little wins. And even now, maybe that's why I love being a sales coach, is because I have many different clients. And when one of my clients says, hey, I just closed this awesome deal, or I just closed this, and I just had another one today that told me, oh, we just closed this awesome big deal. Another one of my clients just said they had their biggest month ever. And it's just like, for me, I'm over the moon. You know, it almost is the same as my success, because I've worked so hard with them to get these formulas in place, these frameworks in place. And when it works and when they see the success, I love it. Let's break out the champagne. Let's have a fun time. Let's celebrate. So I really, really enjoy having those types of wins. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just talking about this recently. So I did a session we did an interview with a psychologist, because one of the things we talked about was kind of managing emotions. And one of the things I realized is when I started the company is I would be like on a super high anytime we won a deal, like I would be dancing. But then if we lost a deal, I would be devastated. So I think that was one thing that I've kind of leveled out a bit. So we won a decent sized project recently. And, you know, if I won it when I started the company, I'd be, you know, dancing around and stuff like that. But I was like, now I realize what's next. So for me, I get excited for a few minutes and then I'm like, okay, now what do we do? Now we have to actually deliver this. You know, because if they're paying a certain amount, then they expect a certain level of quality. So I think my brain always switches within a few minutes saying, okay, what are the next steps we need to do? Because this is where I see most organizations fail. Whether you're an agency, you're a consultant, you're in tech, is really the post-purchase experience. And I've seen a massive, massive gap between that. So you sell something, the salesperson is incredible. They set these expectations, and then you actually get the product, you get the service, and it's not at all what you experienced. And so that obviously leads to bad feelings on the part of the client. They'll complain to the boss, et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen that sour so many different relationships that, I think it's one of the reasons I'm very, very cognizant that I don't try to over deliver. I'm very transparent. I set expectations on here's what we're going to do. And 95% of the time we're able to hit that. But I think the switch is right after, after we win a deal. Yes, I'm excited, but then I know in the back of my mind, what are the things we need to put in place? So putting together things like proper kickoff briefs and trackers and things like that. So the client feels like we're still with them. We haven't just, cashed the check and we're off, spending like crazy. We are still with them. We're invested with them throughout the entire process. So I think it's one thing that I've tried to do a bit better as I've progressed in my entrepreneurial career.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's a couple things I'd like to unpack in what you just said there. One of them, I talked about the highs of when you win, but of course, if you get very high winning, then if you miss out on that and you lose, then you feel that loss. You feel the pain of not getting the high or of losing. And I remember I had a month that was an incredible sales month. I sold 142 deals in 1 month. They're about a $5,000 annual contract. So not huge deals, but it was still a lot of money when you add it all up. And this was a record as an industry. It actually doubled previous industry records. So it was awesome. It was a great month and I loved it. But there was one deal in particular that I remember that I should have closed, and they were perfect for our solution. And they went to another competing product, and I was crushed. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I gave it my all. I went back and looked whenever I lose a deal, and I highly recommend this. I tell my clients, when you lose a deal, go back and analyze what was it, do a postmortem, figure it out how they didn't get the right level of trust. They didn't understand enough. What was it that caused the deal to be lost? And so I went back and looked through it, and I just couldn't figure it out. And it was agonizing to lose this one deal. And I know that I need to get better about being a little more level-headed, which is funny because elsewhere in my life, we're getting deep here. We're getting into psychology here. Elsewhere in my life, I'm very level-headed, and I was educated in hospitality management. So I've been a hotel manager where people yell at you at the front desk because their soup was cold last night. And you're like, I don't even work in the restaurant, but okay. So you have to have that level-headedness, that calm demeanor. And I absolutely have taken that through my life and have that. However, when it comes to winning deals, I get really excited about winning deals and I get really down about not winning deals. And I think that is something I need to work on personally, because some great salespeople know how to stay level-headed and how to not get over the high, but also not beat themselves up and not be crushed, because it can be painful. You don't want to be crushed when you lose a deal. So I don't know if you've felt any of that at all.
Absolutely. I'll send you the interview I did with the psychologist, but we kind of went through the entire thing. And yeah, I felt the exact same way. I still get to some extent, even with, we're talking about getting negative feedback. Unfortunately, we receive very, very few negative feedback nowadays, but it happens every once in a while. Someone doesn't like the style or so on. And I still dwell on those far more than I can receive 100 positive comments, and we generally do. And there'll be that one negative one, that one's like, oh, I didn't like this and that. And it's like, oh, like,
killer.
It eats away at me, that one, and I'm like, I've tried to not take it personal. I mean, it's difficult in our business because if you're a consultant, you're a trainer, whatever it is, it's you carrying the load. But at the end of the day, I realize that the style is not going to be for everyone, and I think that's why I try to set that expectation early on. Like, I am not, if you see me on my LinkedIn videos, I'm not like one of those guys. It's like, there's a buddy of mine who's like that, and he's incredible. But you'll never see me do that, because if you go to a meeting and you're expecting like this guy, and you meet me in person, I'm really like this. I'm pretty chill.
Yeah. Yeah.
there's going to be a disconnect. So I think I try to set those expectations early on, but then you'll always get like, someone who's like, oh, I didn't like that. And there was one time recently where it did eat away with me, but then once again, I had to shift, and instead of dwelling on it, I put together 3 things which I could do to resolve it next time.
Oh, I love it.
So I think that quick switch helped me overcome it, because otherwise I would have dwelled on it. And I think this goes back to the longevity of anyone doing sales or entrepreneurship. It is a long-term game if you're staying in it. And you have to understand it, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So if you lose a sprint, so be it, but it's only part of the longer marathon in which you're running. So that's something I try to keep in mind. And even now, if we lose projects, which is not too often, but let's say we do, I will still try to keep a relationship with that person. And funny enough, we still end up doing business with about half the people that rejected us the first time.
Oh, that's great.
Because I think it goes back to the approach I have, very much a long-term approach. So look, if things aren't the right fit right now, or the budgets got cut right now, fine. I'm going to continue to add as much value as I can. And then eventually, if there's an opportunity that comes up, then great. If not, then, so be it. But I think just having that long-term perspective has changed really the way I do business, and something I failed at most of my career because my bosses had very short-term vision. They said, what can we close this month, or what can we close this quarter? And they would sacrifice a lot of the relationships just to get that short-term revenue. Whereas I don't really care about the revenue anymore. I think we're doing quite fine. And so it has taken some time. I'll be honest. Like when I first started the company, I was super stressed out. I was working like 16-hour days and things like that.
Yep, been there.
But I think now that we've got a bit of runway, I think I'm a bit more level-headed, and I can think a bit clearer. I think that has changed. If I had lost a deal early on, I would dwell on it, and I wouldn't have any positive response. I would just think, oh, why didn't it work? Why didn't it work? That didn't work. Whereas now I can kind of take myself out of the situation and say, okay, in retrospect, here are the 3 things we could have done. And I share it to myself, I share it to the team, and I say, okay, let's focus on these going forward. So it's every time is a learning process, whether I win or lose. Always try to learn kind of what can we do better next time.
I love that. And I have to believe that's a fake story, Joe. How could anybody not love you? I don't believe that could happen.
It happens occasionally.
Right. So I want to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago, which I really liked, is yes, the winning is great, but now you need to deliver. And I completely agree with that. In fact, on my podcast, I had Nick Mehta, the CEO of Gainsight, just a few weeks ago. And he said something that really resonated with me. And I've been in software sales for a long time, been in the software game in SaaS. And he's also in that game, obviously, although they cater to a lot of different companies. He himself is a software CEO. So he said something very interesting, and it was, SaaS has changed the game in terms of the focus on sales to the focus on customer success. Because initially, in the old days of software, you would sell somebody a software package, and then they'd have it, and you're gone. It's not a monthly thing. You sell them a big upfront package. They buy it, they install it, and if it works or not, who knows? But it's over. You already sold it. You already made your money, so you're gone. With SaaS, it's a recurring deal. It's every month or every year that you're paying this. And so you can't just, hey, good luck. Hope it worked out. Bye. It's more of a, okay, we want this person to stick around for a long time. And I've taught classes on the metrics, of CAC payback period. You've got to make sure to get your money back for what you put in to get that lead and convert the deal. So in order to do that, you've got to have them stick around for a long time. So the focus in software completely shifted from we need to sell all the time to now let's make sure our customers are successful. Let's make sure that we deliver so that not only do they stick around, which obviously increases our lifetime value, but it also means that they're going to tell their friends. They're going to become raving fans and talk about this and this with their friends, and we actually sell more. And so we're seeing that. We're seeing much more of the sales process or sales deals won through the customer success experience where people are hearing about it in the word of mouth, and you start to get this this growth. So I love that you brought that up because it's super, super important. One of the things that you said, I actually teach about in my master class, is that there's a whole lesson that I teach about how you can actually improve your churn through good sales. And there are a lot of different factors, I think 6 factors where you can improve your churn rate based on how good your sales is. And one of them is right selling, not overselling, under promise, over deliver, that whole thing, just like you said. If you are selling in the software world, we call it vaporware, meaning stuff your system doesn't have, then as soon as they get in, they're going to realize that you pulled a bait and switch and they're out of here. So you have to sell the right level of experience so that they have their expectations set correctly, and they're going to be much more likely to stick around and be good clients. It sounds like you totally agree.
Absolutely. I agree 110%. I think it's one of the things that kind of frustrates me about marketing and sales in general is always that focus on customer acquisition. And while customer acquisition is important, I don't think it's the end all or the key metric. So for me, I look at things like loyalty. Are people coming back to me year on year? Are they introducing me to different people within the organization or different geographies? That for me is far more a success factor versus how many new deals can I close. And if you've looked about it, I mean, it's beneficial to both parties. On the customer side, they feel like they're getting the attention and love they need. But also from a business point of view, it's far more cost effective to sell or resell or upsell your existing customers than it is to try and find new one. So once again, it seems like very common sense things to me, but so many organizations I work with. So there's the marketing funnel, which most people have seen is like that. I always tell them actually flip the funnel upside down. That's where I focus. So I focus on loyalty first. I focus even on the content. If you see the content I've created, a lot of the content I co-create with my clients. So I'm doing a session in a couple of weeks with one of my clients, and it helps build their profile. I have a decent network now. I get to feature them, feature their insights, and it's one of those things I get to sit back and say, okay, let them shine. I think too many people want to feel like, oh look, let me have the spotlight. Whereas I've had bosses like that, and it's like, you're not paying your own checks. Your customers are paying your checks. So why don't you let them shine a little bit of time? So I think just flipping that model, looking at how you can add a relationship post-purchase, how you can co-create content with them, how you can give them an opportunity to shine, really excel in their career. I think one of the best quotes I ever heard in my career was from a previous boss. And he said that your job as a consultant or a similar role is to get your customer promoted. That is your main KPI. And when you think about it that way, it's such a profound statement that, that takes, a few steps going backwards, understanding the KPIs, what matters to them, what matters to the business, and that should be your sole goal. There's a gentleman I won't name who says, we have to focus on revenue. And it's funny. I used to be like that most of my career, and I failed miserably. Whereas now, this is probably going to shock a lot of people, but I don't have any revenue metrics, or I don't have any revenue KPIs, essentially.
Wow. That is unique.
But it's even more unique is that we have what I've created as value metrics. So instead of replacing, we need to hit this revenue KPI each month, I say, okay, we need to interview this many people, or I need to create this many podcasts, or I need to do this and that.
Oh, I like it.
So that I've completely shifted, and I've taken this stress from driving revenue, which caused me a lot of gray hair in the beginning. And the funny thing is, we've driven a ton more revenue than I could have anticipated by not having any revenue goals. So I think when people, and I've commented about this on a couple people on LinkedIn recently, is saying, chase revenue at all costs and things like that. It's like, yes, revenue is one of the outputs, but it's not the end goal for me. Like I said, if I can still add value and they don't buy from then, I have still done my job. So I think just having that shift in mindset has helped, help grow the business, help grow the team, and just make sure everyone's happy. Like I said, if you're chasing money, then you have the wrong mindset, and then you're going to take the wrong behaviors and actions.
That's amazing. And it's definitely a unique perspective, but I think it's one that's refreshing. I don't know how on board I am with that yet, especially since I have all these KPIs that, especially in the software world, we got to look at. But I think that the overarching principle of it, I definitely am on board with. That you shouldn't be just focused on how can you make a buck. You should be focused on how do you take care of your customer. And one of my founders I started a company with a long time ago would say, hey, let's make sure we're solving problems and we'll figure out the money after that. Now, there's a lot of people that would freak out at that statement, but it worked out. We figured out the money and we made a lot of money with that company. So I'm a believer. You've got me. Now, I don't know if we can convince the rest of the world, Joe, but it would be really interesting to see us try.
It's one of those things that I am putting into practice with some of my clients as well. So we work with different agencies, different multinationals, such that, look, I've done it throughout my career. I mean, my previous company, I built it up and then we sold it. They sold it for a decent amount. So I've done it throughout my career. It's not something that I've just kind of made up. It's more in terms of documenting, looking back and saying what's worked, rather than me giving like these random predictions and saying, if you do this and so and so. I mean, I can tell you that it's worked in multiple organizations. They've either sold it or they've grown significantly. And I continue to do it for my clients. So yes, I think it does scare a lot of people, but for me, I think that's what I try to do. I try to lead by example. And I try to do things that are a little bit outside the box and push the way people think. So in terms of flipping the model, in terms of getting rid of revenue metrics, I've spent majority of my career following the book. So you have to do it this way. You have to have this creds deck. You have to look this way, et cetera, et cetera. And I failed. I'll be honest. I was fired multiple times. Like I tried to follow the same playbook as everyone else. And I realized that, going back to your point about differentiation, 90% of salespeople or entrepreneurs are doing the exact same way.
Yep.
So how is it that you are standing out from the pack? And to be honest, you're not, because you're doing it the exact same way everyone else is. So I think I've been very conscious. And it's easier for me. I understand that as an entrepreneur, I have the freedom to kind of do whatever I want. If you're in a multinational, it's a little bit tougher. I think that's why they hire me as a kind of a scapegoat in case things go terribly wrong. They're like, just blame Joe, fire him. But knock on wood, that hasn't happened yet.
No, yeah, exactly.
It's one of those things I try to practice what I preach and just try to think about things from a different perspective.
That's amazing. And I love the perspective. It's great. And I think our time's coming to a close, but I've heard a lot of great, unique ideas. And I just really enjoy your perspective, Joe, and the way that you look at things and the way you approach things. And it seems very natural. It seems very you. And I think that that's good. It's authentic. It's not that you're trying to fit into somebody else's philosophy. You're fitting into what works great for you. So I think that's wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's taken me a lot of time, but yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this chat. This has been fun. I feel like we could talk all night.
We probably could,
it's night. For you, it's daytime in Singapore. Yeah. But at some point, I need to go to bed.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate you having me on as well.
Absolutely. Well, take care, and take care of everybody else. Bye-bye.
All right. You too. Take care. Bye.